let me give you a few tips that the people who come later on, they are the losers. Okay, today we are going to have, I saw your mails and last time when we interacted, it was almost a fortnight back. And you were worried about how is going to be the credits. How am I going to evaluate you in this exam? It is a very important thing. So I think so they have already posted it, but I just wanted to make clear over here for my class. And I said, as in the previous class, it will be very difficult to fail this particular subject. I think at least 80 to 90% of you should get an A or an A plus. The people who try very hard to get a B, but nothing less than a B. That I would expect. So to cut it short, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to have any mid semesters for now. And as the class progresses, I would like to say that the projects also, if I give you a project, I would like to finish it off inside the class so that you have time when you go back for the rest of your major subjects. So I think it suits us. Are you okay with that? Yeah. So to ensure that whatever I am speaking and what you are taking in, we are on the same platform. So to ensure that every class, most of the classes, I'll have the short quiz. And the quiz will be, whatever I have taught in the class, be a little attentive. I'm very sure you all are the cream of the society. It should not be very difficult for you all to clear the quiz. So this today, as I said, most of this is why we are teaching you all of this is tomorrow when you all are going to establish yourself in the society. You're going to make certain search engines. You're going to work in researches. You're going to work in the government, make policies. So till you do not understand what the problem is, it's very difficult to make a policy. So please, as most of my examples I'll give you the case studies. Such a thing has happened. Such a thing is going to happen. So you are able to connect. I'm not going to give you any story or thing. Has happened in the past. See the clips, learn the lesson, and so you will be able to connect what I'm trying to say. The last class, as after I taught, there were a few, people who had come up to me separately, and they said that there were certain terminologies that I was using, medical terminologies, and those terminologies I felt as if, because me being a medical person, I took it for granted that it is understood. But good that the people came and spoke to me, they wanted to clarify that a particular term that I'm using, a medical term, this is a common term which has already come in your common language, in your lingos. But what is the meaning of that particular thing? Like suppose we say that so and so is a case or a patient. What do you mean by a patient? Is he a clinical case? Is he a laboratory case? Is he a probable case? Is he a definitive case? So these are the like engineer people. You have your own lingo, and you assume that the other person understands. But if you speak in your language completely to me, I might understand 60% of it and 40% I'll do guesswork. So I don't want you all to do the same thing when I speak. When I speak, I want it crystal clear that this is what I meant. Why? Because tomorrow you need to do calculations on this. Because I'm pretty sure Professor Mandi in his last class, he might have shown you how we calculate. Like tomorrow, suppose like COVID came. We all can relate ourselves to COVID. We have lived this era. Suppose tomorrow some other XY disease comes. So how, first of all, how will you know that a particular case has come? Is it an epidemic? Or is it just one of those diseases which will die its own death? Or, if it's an epidemic, you have to fight it out. You have to make mathematical models to say to the government that, okay, expected at the end of 1 month, so many people will be affected. Or if you're going to make a vaccine, and as usual, resources are very less, limited resources. So, which is the target group of the population that we are going to target to get the vaccines first? So, these are the things which you all will be dealing. So, if you do not know the proper definition of what a thing means, it will be very difficult for you all to calculate and put it in a formula so that we get the results in. So today I am going to, like last class, I'll do a quick recapitulation. I will not go through the slides, but in general, what we spoke because it is almost 15 days that we have last met. So I'll do a quick recapitulation of what we had done last time, and then I will explain or I'll quickly give the different definitions or the different words that we use, which we keep on referring to in the next class. Right? So we have, I think the rest of them are called to drop. Can we close your doors and start? Or should we wait? Please come in. Give them some extra another 2 minutes. As I said in my previous class, either I come late or you all come early. I'm punctual with time. So you tell me we start the class at 2:10, I'll come at 2. After the doors will be shut. Because I have very limited attention span and I get distracted very quickly. Any more latecomers you can see outside the door? We start, and I said I increased this slide for the latecomers, and that we do something during the quiz we gave them 5 minutes. Is it so? Then I'm okay with it. Then we'll ensure the punctuality of it. Okay, like today's class, as I said, in the second half, I'll show you a clinical clip as we had shown last time, and based on that will be a quiz, and it will be evaluated here in the class itself. So it will be a 15 marks quiz, and it's all it's match the following, fill in the blanks. It's going to be very. Please be attentive in the class, and I'm very sure you will score a full 100 of it. Right? So, like as we said, we have these quizzes, we have the average of them, and I'll assess you 20 marks from your score. So, I think so from my side, you can start 20 plus and your race starts. Okay. So, with this, we have a recapitulation of last week, or last week, we had done a definition of epidemiology. Anybody who would like to quickly summarize it? Any volunteers? We had what is epidemiology? I introduced you to epidemiology. I introduced you to different terms. What are determinants? What are this thing? Why? Come and sit on this side. We'll see how many late. So we have so epidemiology. What do you mean by determinants? What do we mean by desirables? What do you mean by the epidemiological triad? That is the host, agent, environment. When it is in equilibrium, nothing happens. But if some of them increases or decreases, we have something which comes into what we call as a disease. And what was the use of studying epidemiology? How you can use it. And we had introduced you to the cholera epidemic, which had come in the market in London, called as a John Snow, and what he did and how he could. So keeping that in mind, all of you all can be detectives. And today's clip is also something similar to that. So I want to keep your ears and eyes open and go as per it. So that's last time. Right hand side, this way. This is reserved for the latecomers. Okay, we start. So as I said, these are few terms which I mentioned them in my previous class, but we'll quickly go through it. Epidemic is something that occurs in a population which is in excess than what is expected in a time and place. Like you are having viral flu. It is known that this rainy season people are having viral flu. But due to some reason, instead of 100, the figure runs into 10,000 or more than that. Right? This is epidemic. Cluster, a group of cases in a specific time and a place that might be more than expected. Like suppose all of us in this class, we went to celebrate my birthday party. Please come in. I don't request them. Ask them to come in. Okay. Yes, latecomers this way, please. All this. So the cluster, we go for a party, and suddenly out of 100 of us, we see that 60 or 70 of us are having vomiting, diarrhea, high fever, etc. And the rest of our hospitalized who do not go for this party, they are not affected. So that means this particular group or this particular place went to a particular area, and that was the time they might be. So a cluster of patients. Endemic. Something is already there in the population and it is present throughout but is not showing clinical symptoms. Like Suppose a person is malaria. It's malaria, that parasite is in his body. You go to the northeast, you go to most of the countries in Africa, malaria is endemic over there. So if people keep getting fever, they get okay. But the parasite is sitting very well inside the body. Pandemic. When an epidemic occurs together in a number of countries over the globe, like we had COVID, it is a pandemic. The other thing was the pandemic long time back was plague, smallpox. These were the pandemic ones. Little bit about contamination. What do you mean by contamination? These are the words which we use every day in our day-to-day work. But what do you mean? What is the difference between contamination, infestation, contagious disease? These are similar things, but they differ a little bit this way and that way. So contamination is the presence of an infectious agent on a body or a surface. Might like to have clothes, beddings, toys, surgical dressings. These are contaminated. Like when we say, when you are somebody's your handkerchief, you're blowing inside on your handkerchief when you have a cold or a cough. That handkerchief is contaminated. Why is it contaminated? It has those viruses. If anybody uses that handkerchief, he or she might get infected. This way. So that is contamination. Then coming to infestation. What do you mean by infestation? That particular bacteria, germ, virus, whichever is there, is lodged in that surface. It might be a human being, it might be an animal, it might be one of the wooden things, and it reproduces over there. It is like one becomes 100, thousands, it reproduces, and the number increases. Like if you see bed bugs, you all are staying in hostels. You have bed bugs, and you think, yes, so the best way of killing bed bugs is take out that whole mattress outside the bed outside, because if one is there over there, you keep on reducing and you keep on infecting. It is infested. We say it is infested with bed bugs or lice. Somebody has got a lice. It is reproducing inside your hair or in our inside our stomach, roundworms, hookworms. You're infested with it. Contagious disease. Contagious disease is Hindi you say na choo chat wala touch. You touch somebody and the other person also gets infected. So what do you mean by contagious diseases? That is, it is transmitted through touch. Like we have scabies, you have those people scratching, and if that person touches somebody else, the other person gets infected. Something like leprosy, you have your sexually transmitted diseases. These are all contagious diseases. Now coming to the infection. What do you mean by infection? Now infection is entry of virus, bacteria, anything inside an agent in the host. It's an agent which goes into the host and it multiplies. So inside that host gets infected. Now infection, if a person is infected, does that person this way? That does that person get the illness? Not necessarily. That number of viruses or bacteria, whatever it is not enough or sufficient to give clinical symptoms like fever, etc. But he is infected. So, what are the different types of infection that a person has? Gradients of infection is colonization. You might be having that bacteria or virus. It is living in symbiosis with your normal cell. So in our skin we have certain bacteria, in our gut we have certain bacteria which we call the healthy bacteria. So it is not causing an infection. So it is just there. Subclinical or inapparent infection means it is already there with us, but it is lying low. It is not, you are not showing the clinical symptoms. Another is called latent infection. Like in our childhood, many of us have suffered from chickenpox. No? Chickenpox is a very common disease in our childhood. So what happens to people who are clinically affected? So you get fever, you have running nose, you have those blisters over you. So that is infection. But there are certain people whose immunity is sort of little more. So this virus, what it does, it infects that person, but it quietly sits at the nerve endings of the person. So the person might not get chickenpox for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but sometime in his life, due to some reason he might be stressed, his immunity might come low, and that is the time the virus plays up and it comes in the form of herpes. Like you might have seen people who have got small blisters on their face or some part of the body. So herpes is a type of the same virus, varicella virus, in which instead of chickenpox, it is sitting in the latent, quietly dormant in the body, waiting for the right environment and the right thing to surface. So that is the latent infection growth. And the most common clinically, you get affected and you can see that a person has running nose, whatever it is clinical infestation. Now, type of cases. As I said, what do you call as a case? There might be different type of cases. A confirmed case, a probable case. So, like if I give you an example in COVID, all of us have seen COVID. So everybody say he is a case. How do you diagnose that that person is a case? Is it clinically a case, or is he lab? Is he lab tested positively, or is he probable case? Something like that. So case, the definition of a case is a person in the population or study group identified having a particular disease, health disorder, or condition under investigation. So, like in COVID, it was anybody having fever, coughing, something like that. We first used to think COVID, but like COVID, person might have viral fever also. He also might be coughing. Person might have pneumonia also. Not necessarily that you have COVID. So, how do we differentiate them? So, the confirmed cases, one is he has the symptoms. So, what we do is we take his sputum, cough, blood, or whatever it is, and we get it tested. It gets tested in the lab, confirmed in the lab, and so we know that he is, yes, he is a positive case. Why do we require this positive test? Remember, Professor Mandal had said during his time a seroprevalence study. A mention of something about seroprevalence which you all will be doing for your mathematical calculations. So once one is clinically is giving you all the signs, then lab is turning positive. So you know for sure that these number of people are clinically tested. But suppose the test is not available, then you cannot be sure whether he is clinical or not. He is a confirmed case or not. Coming to a probable case. We all the probability, no? Permutation, combinations, probability. So we refer to an individual who is showing those signs and symptoms, which is similar to COVID or any thing, but he has not undergone those lab tests. So we think that he might have it. Why can any of you tell why this is a thing? Because during COVID time, what were we doing? We were quarantining people. We ourselves did not know who is positive, who is negative, and because people were very, the lab tests were not available, freely available, or they were very costly, limited lab tests. So these are the things when we were shifting people, quarantine them, so that we try to minimize the infection to others. But what is a possible case? The same thing, he is exhibiting signs and symptoms of a particular disease, but he does not meet all the specific criteria required. So we do the testing. So it is a possible case, right? When we had COVID, we had two types of tests. We had a RAT test and we had an RT-PCR test. One test was in which we were getting the samples, the results immediately within 2 minutes or 5 minutes. But it was not a definitive. But the RT-PCR was a definitive test, which was 48 hours, 24 hours, if you see. So, but the RAT was available to you in how much? 100 rupees? 150 rupees? Whereas the RT-PCR was much costly. Initially, it was something like 1,000 when it was not. So what we were doing is, suppose a person was RAT positive, not COVID. Is it confirmed that he is COVID? No. There is a chance that he might be negative also. So he used to fall in this possible case. And when an RT-PCR used to come positive, then we used to say, fine, he is a clinical case, a case. Whereas if it was negative, then we bring him in the possible case. So that is how we were doing the quarantining part of it. So these are the different types of cases. A lab case, as the thing says, the laboratory reports are positive, that means he is a confirmed. But over here we have a catch is, when should the lab test be done? If a lab test is being done at a later stage or too early, the lab stage, we might miss out the positive type. Suppose, how is the test done? We might know a little bit of biology about it. An antigen or something goes inside our body, we have something called an antibody these days. So we have to give that body some time for that antibody to generate. So suppose we have typhoid. We are doing tests for typhoid, or we are doing tests even for the other tests. So in typhoid, the normal time we ask them is when the fever starts, after the fourth or the fifth day, we ask them to get a typhoid test. If somebody has done the test, the first or the second test, the second day, might be the test might come negative because we have not given enough time for the body to generate the antibodies to be caught in that particular test. So as we said in the second bullet, timing of the test is very important related to the symptoms. And it plays a crucial role in the surveillance. Because the people who are positive and negative, we can safely move them out. So the lab test has been done in HIV, tuberculosis, COVID, influenza, etc. So now the second part coming is that this is where you all will come into calculation is what are the tools that we use to measure a particular test. So the tools which are commonly used is the count, the proportion, ratio, rate, incidence, prevalence. These are terms which we use every day in our life. So you think what is so important in a count? So the most simplest part of it. So we count total number of cases which have come, and if the occurrences, when does our antenna go up? When we see the count is much more than when it was in a particular period a year before, or it is a new thing. So that is the trigger which starts your public health response. Coming to proportion. Proportion is, it is expressed as a percentage, like the numerator is a part of the denominator. Like in this whole class, how many people are having a running nose versus the total number of students present in this class. So it shows the proportion is so much part of the class is bit so much are unwell or something like that. So always the numerator has got something to play with the denominator. But unlike it, this is a ratio. What do you mean by a ratio? A ratio is a fraction in which there is no specific relationship between the numerator and denominator. Both of them are abstract. They are not related to each other. Like doctor population ratio. In a population of 5 lakhs, how many doctors are there? They're not related at all. So, but it is a ratio. Or you can say the ratio between the number of males who have got jaundice with the number of females who do not have jaundice. They are not related in any way. Or the sex ratio. In a state, how many male children are there? How many female children are there? So this is ratio. Coming to the rate. What do you mean by rate? Rate is the number of cases which are occurring in a specific period and also depends upon the size of the population. So the three things that we take into consideration while we calculate a rate is the number of cases of the illness, the size of the population at risk, and the period at which the rate is calculated. So the rate is number of cases by the population at risk into 100. So why is the rate used for? We will come later on. There's another thing that we keep on mentioning in our lecture, something called mortality, something called morbidity. Okay, mortality is people who have died. Morbidity in a layman's term is when a person is infected, he's in bed. He cannot go to work. So when he doesn't go to work or disability, how is that calculated? That is expressed in morbidity. Mortality is people who die. So what are the common mortality measures you might be reading in newspapers or in books? We say crude death rate, specific death rates, case fatality ratio, proportional mortality ratio, and survival rates. So the crude death, this is the most smoothest way of getting any sort of data that you want. Like number of deaths in 1 year per 1,000 estimated mid-year population in a given place. Like suppose in the city of Bangalore or in the city of Mumbai, we have number of deaths that occurred in the last 1 year. That is divided by the mid population of Mumbai. So how do you calculate it? So what do you get by a crude birth rate? You can get age specified, infant mortality, how many kids have died, how many people above the age of 60, 70 have died. It lacks comparability. You are not able to compare anything. It's just a figure which is given here. And it is useful in demography. Mid-year population means you are taking how will you calculate the population? So you have census. I don't know how many of you have seen census. The government sends to everybody of our houses and they start going to every house and they say, tell me how many people are there in our. Suppose they go to about 1 lakh, right? And this is a big study. You can't finish it within 5 or 10 days. So what you do is start from suppose 1st of January of 2022 to 31st of December 22. So they go to every house and they keep on collecting. Suppose in a particular house there was mother, father, and one child. But that was in the month of January when he went and checked that house. But in the month of June, they were blessed by twins. Two more added in that. We went to another house, and suppose they had a family of 7. In the way, there was a grandfather, grandmother, or something like that. They tested the house somewhere in the month of March. And then these two expired somewhere in the month of September. So you can't keep on addition. Somewhere you have to do the cutoff rate. So what they do is mid-year population by DSA, we start from particular year, end at that particular year, add the total together, and take an average of that. We come to a mid-year population to say that we are not exactly 0.001. We are somewhere close to it. That's why we are getting the mid-year population. So we have some goal points to compare with. Coming to the specific death, specific, which has occurred due to specific disease, like as you said, COVID. How many people have COVID have died in the last 1 year or 2 years? Or like we say, how many people of cancer? Cancer again is a huge thing. So we make it into smaller thing, lung cancer, or we may say breast cancer, stomach cancer. How many people have died due to tuberculosis, road traffic accidents? So these are cause or disease specific, or we can have group specific. I make it much smaller groups. How many people of COVID have died in the age group below 10 years or above 50 years? So we are trying to compare which population is more at risk. Gender. How many people who are smokers main smokers have got lung cancer vis-a-vis female smokers, or smokers and non-smokers? So we are doing in that way, we are comparing them, the specific deaths. Case fatality ratio. In this, we want to know how virulent a particular virus is. Like total number of deaths due to a particular disease by the total number of cases of the disease into 100. Like suppose in Mumbai, there were totally 5 lakhs COVID cases. Out of 5 lakh COVID cases, 50,000 people died. So what is the case fatality ratio? So 50,000 divided by that 5 lakhs into 100. So you are getting an estimate of what is the virulence of that virus. How many people it can kill. So if you remember, when COVID was there were certain predictions that we were doing. We were predicting that if this virus comes in us, then it is expected that so many people might die, so many people might get affected. So how were they doing those things? On what basis were they doing it? So we have to understand this, because when you develop those data or the mathematical models, which will be taught in the other class, you will be referring to such things. And it is typically used in infectious disease, as I said, related to virulence, and it changes. Wherever you see your thumb rule is that epidemiological field. Those 3 things, anywhere as you keep on going, you can see either of those 3, either the agent, the host, or the environment. Some of them have moved a little bit, and they are not in equilibrium. As a result, it's reflecting either as your case fatality ratio, specific death ratio, etc. Coming to your proportional mortality ratio. Again, in this is number of deaths due to a specific disease divided by the total number of deaths from all causes into 100. Suppose you go to some XYZ hospital over here, Apollo Hospital in Mumbai. And in Apollo Hospital, in the last 1 year, you come to know that there are 5,000 deaths. But you want to know specifically how many people have died out of COVID. So how do you compare that? So you again go into that register and you find out of those 5,000 deaths, 500 people have died due to COVID. So 500 divided by 5,000 into 100. So it will again give you a rate. So if I want to refine it and I want to say that those people who have died of COVID, how many were vaccinated, how many were not vaccinated? Like you want to know the efficacy of a vaccine. Or you want to know the efficacy of how many had comorbidities, how many had diabetes, how many had hypertension, and you compare them. And then you come to a figure that the people who had comorbidities were more prone to die than the people who were critical. So this is how you will get your search engines or your formulas. So for a specific disease, for a specific group, that number of deaths below 5 years of age by the total number of deaths into 100. That you want to know that the infant mortality rate in a particular region is much more than the infant mortality rate in some other region. And what is the reason? What is the cause? You go deeper and deeper, and then you will come to it. But till you do not know that there is a problem, you do not go for the answer to the problem. So the different population groups, the different periods of time, these are all used for calculating a proportional mortality ratio. And the survival rate. One time we are thinking the people were dying, and the other side is the survival rate. And the survival rate is the opposite of the death. The proportion of survivors among a group of patients followed up over a period of time. Like you read in your newspaper, certain cardiac deaths. People say COVID had something with the heart disease, which is not yet true. They're still reading it. You see the super fit people suddenly are collapsing in gyms, or they're collapsing in their day-to-day. Something is there, but we are not able to understand what it is. So we are trying to figure out all the dots, which dot can be connected together. So it is over a period of time. So we see in the last 5 years, people who had cardiac problems. Okay, suppose they had high cholesterol level or high blood sugar. How many of them have survived in the last 5 years? We take 5 years thing and we take a this. So they are alive after 5 years by the total number of people who had cardiac disease, the total number of people who had hypertension into 100. So this is how we calculate the survival rate. Now coming to morbidity. That was mortality, now coming to morbidity. Now in morbidity, what happens is it's magnitude and characteristics of the disease. So it is more relevant than mortality. Because mortality, the person has gone. But morbidity, the person is living after having that disease. So it is essential for research on the disease etiology, and it is used for monitoring the healthcare activities. Now, how do we measure morbidity? We measure morbidity by 2 ways. One is by incidence, calculation of the incidence, and the second is by the prevalence. So the incidence again can be divided into 2 parts: the attack rate and the secondary attack. Whereas the prevalence can be point and period prevalence. So what is incidence? Incidence is the total number of new cases of a disease in a given population over a specified period of time. So it describes the rate of development of disease. So like if I want to say in the last 1 week, how many students in IIT Mumbai had conjunctivitis? Okay. So in the last 1 week only I'm talking of the new cases which occurred in 1 week in a particular place. So that is called incidence. So the numerator is the number of the new cases. The denominator is the population at risk, the total number of students in the entire campus, and the period is that 1 week. So we have it for a specific population, specific time, and a specific number of cases. So this is how incidence is calculated. So incidence again has got 2 ways. The special incidence rates. So the one is the attack rate. What is the attack rate of a particular virus? And how much of exposure? Suppose I have eye flu and you come and talk to me, or I have viral and you have spent 5 minutes with me. You have spent 1 hour with me or something like that. So how much is the time period of exposure? And you observe it for a very short time and you express it in percentage. The secondary attack rate. Now over here I come again is when a person is infected. Suppose I go and meet somebody and I get infected. So I'm the first person on the primary infection. Tomorrow I come here and I teach you all and I infect you all. So you're the secondary rate. So how much is the viral? Like if how much, if suppose the secondary rate is quite high and I'm able to infect the whole almost 80% of this class, that means the secondary infection rate is very high. So it's expressed in percentage. You have a figure for it. The number of exposed persons developing the disease within the incubation period by the number of exposed susceptible contacts. So to be simple, like today I have come, you're a class of 50, and I am talking to you. God forbid something out of that, next 1 week, suppose 40 are infected and 10 are not infected. So how do you calculate the secondary attack? So if you come to know, you will compare a secondary attack rate can be very high or can be low. So this is how we say the actual attack rate and the secondary attack. So the special incidence rates. Special incidence rate is secondary attack rate, as we said, is applied to infectious diseases where the primary case is infected for a very short time. The susceptible people are required to be identified, and it is difficult to calculate in diseases with a large proportion of subclinical cases, like malaria. Malaria is already there in the population. Something has triggered, so malaria has started. So I cannot say that the number of mosquitoes have increased. That is why malaria has. So in such cases, we can't calculate very specifically for the incidence rate, and it is effective in evaluating the control measures, isolation and vaccination. As we said, like quarantine, all of you have seen. So in COVID, if you isolate that particular person from the rest of the population, that population may be saved. And if you vaccinate a person. Prevalence. What is the difference between incidence and prevalence? Prevalence is a cumulative thing. Total number of people affected in that population over the whole period is known, divided by the population. So from 1st of August till 30th of August, total number of people who had viral divided by the population into 100 is the prevalence. So the easiest way is a formula. This is how we calculate prevalence. Prevalence is incidence into duration. So if you are given any either of the two, you can find out the third. So incidence versus prevalence, what is the use of calculating incidence and what is the use of prevalence? Incidence is usually used in the research of the how to find out the cause of the disease. It helps in initiating the control measures and checking the effectiveness of the therapeutic thing. Like I gave a vaccine and somebody person was given a vaccine. So whether he will develop COVID or not, or he will develop influenza. Prevalence is used basically for administrative purposes. That today, if so many people are affected and they don't come for jobs, or do we have so many beds in the hospital? That is how we use for calculating the prevalence. The reproductive rate of infection. How infective a person is. So the factors which I included is the person, probability of transmission between an infected person and a susceptible individual. And this is also, these are the 4 things that we take into calculation. The frequency of the population, how frequently that infected person has come and mingled with the rest of the population. The duration of infection, which is in which stage of his infection. He might be in his 2nd or 3rd day when he's excreting maximum number of viruses, or he might be in the later part when the infection is almost died. The virulence of the organism, if that virus is very active virulent, it might infect more people. And the immunity of the population. If the population has got a very high immunity, like on today's date, we have COVID. So the number of COVID cases, why have they stopped increasing? Because most of us are vaccinated. So we are able to fight it off. So the immunity of the population. So the dynamics of disease transmission. I think we stop over here because I'll show you a particular video. See the video and then we will have the quiz, right? And then we will continue the rest part of it. One of you had to go for another class. Is your class there? At what time you still have time? So we'll try doing UX. So till now, whatever you have seen, you have seen. So we'll show you the video and see it because most of the answers are there in the video itself. Can you just call the technical person who's standing outside? Any questions now till now? Depends on paper. I can you need more specific? Yes. If I talk about different, it's called configuration. I have to talk about yes. How can I show you? How do you do the case study? So you have something called an org sketch. I'll show you that.
I will require once again.
Yeah.
After we do.
After.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So at what time you will start the quiz?
I take under 20 minutes.
Okay.
So somewhere between 3:15, 3:10, 3:15 minutes.
3:10.
Yeah. Make it 3:15.
Okay. next time we look at face with an issue with it.
तो मैं देख क्या हो मैं तो नहीं लैपटॉप में करना है
और एक जल्दी वन
बस
नेक्स्ट
नेक्स्ट
जल्दी कर 1 o'clock.
Six. This is really difficult. All done. The moment you say all done, you need to and go to the next. I have these they by kind and even for 15 minutes. If you got to meet by it's not important. How many left? Raise your hands. One, two. Don't hurry. Another 5 minutes. Do it. और कितना टाइम 5 मिनट क्या मैं सोची थी फट 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 कर देंगे आप लोग भी हाँ जितना देखेंगे you keep on thinking not A B B ना C whatever the gut says say there's no negative marking. Done. Any more? Now I should say up. All done? Any more? Any more hands up? I wait for about 5 minutes. 2 minutes. Done? Everybody through? Anybody wants another 2 minutes? Yes, no, tell me something. No? So we call it. Let's show you the answers now. Right? And then we will go for the next. I know it's very tough, but done. Shall we call it now? Shall I show the answers? Everybody submitted. Okay. Anybody more? Something. How do you want to do it? Once you finish, you want to be into groups of 5 or 6, and I give you a topic. Can you prepare it? Where I go? And how will you continue if I have another quiz at the end of this session? When you miss on those marks? So, yes. So that is why you should have told us. I don't have time that let everybody go by this part and to some and not to others. One. So how many do you want to do? How many do you want to work? Only one person in the group will be working, the other hardly. So I thought we can make it go for 6 to 8. That's no, guys, it's not. We choose our friends. You tell me how you want the groups. I had initially thought a group of 6 to 8, 6. It's not. And now I like to see the lower people are going to. How many are there in this entire class? 80 or 50? It's a hard chance in maths. If I was in a group, I wouldn't have worked. I would have asked the group leader to work. Huh? How many are there in this class? 100? Nobody has crossed out? Either I am limit or we love something. Huh? Okay, so 100 what we do is dividing into a group of what? 8, okay. So one will be a group into the last one, the least attendance वाले उनको मैं सबसे कम करूँगी, maximum attendance I will make them. So we do that. So somewhere during your after your mid semester, once you have through with all your heavy subjects, I'll give you certain work topics, but I'll make you work in the classroom. That you can do it online. You want to come physically to the class, choice is it. So we assign 4 such classes or 3 such classes, and you all have to give a presentation on that particular case study. Because by now I've shown you 2 case studies. So I'll give you something like that which you have to come up with the question. Suppose it is an academic, how do you do it? How do you investigate it? Where are the characters? And it is part of the mathematics modeling also for which you have actually joined this course. You will do that. Are you okay with it? How many people are not okay with it? Raise your hands. I think all of you are okay with it. So, yeah, I think that's what your both important. Your is basically out of both of them. So I speak with Dr. Nandi and I see whether you want to do the combined manner or we want to do the separate paper, right? And my entire endeavor would be that finish it well itself and go free and you can focus on the rest of the major subjects. Okay. So everybody through with the quiz? Close? Can you show the answers? Yeah, please show the answers.
Everyone submitted.
Submitted. Look, be true to yourself. I'm not going to be either like police topic and all. But true to yourself, you go. Last, everybody submitted.
If it's seen that it is like very well, I think that we will have to participate in that.
This one. Right. If anybody is there, tell me until another 2 minutes.
You can see the names of it.
People you want to show the answers, please. Escape and come out from this. You to escape and come out. Stop sharing. To belong? RORS. Okay. Come out to the team. Now you should. Sure.
नहीं दिख रहा है ना? Here we don't have anything that shows.
Thank you.
हाँ,
These
मैं
are
बताता हूँ.
possible values.
ऐसे क्यों?
So what was the answer? The first question, all the following illustrate the purpose of epidemiology in the public health except somebody got the backbench. What was the answer for the first question? Yeah. I think it's an easy cakewalk for everybody. Right? Sorry? I could get it. Zoom it. Zoom कर दीजिए और zoom यहाँ से zoom.
बस.
Now is it okay? What should I have specs? Yeah, sitting the last one. The ones who say zoom, go for a night check. Okay. Is it okay? Okay. The next, this was an easy one. Everybody knew. Can you come next, please? Match. I've been telling this from the first day. So this was also easy, I think so. Right? Any doubts anywhere? Please stand up and ask. Okay? The next. Wait, hold on. Yeah. Second one. Which one? The second one. Epidemiologists use a model for studying the infectious disease and spread that involves a microbe that causes the disease. The organism that harbors the disease and external factors that cause or allow disease. This is also known as. So what way you are answering? Transmission, host, and environment. No. But we are asking you about the epidemiological trial. We just played with the words. So that is why I say no. Think. I just played with the words. Okay, the third one. One second. Anybody, any doubts in the third? No. Fourth. Right? Fifth. Fine. Sixth. I made it specially for your class. I have a nice view over here, how many are sleeping and how many are looking. So I said I put this question. 7. Eight. No worries, any of them will do. 1 mark, you get full. This is why, as I said in the beginning of this class, I'm doing April and March. Right? 9. Ah. So I just wanted to know because in the last class, yeah, I consider her as a part of it because her is a little ahead of you all. But in the last class, I saw many of you all score a 10 out of a 10. So I said either I give full marks to ChatGPT or I give full marks to whatever because I didn't expect that many a 10 out of 10 in the last class. So I said, let me test your knowledge. And so though this I had not taught, I tried because I've been telling it for a long time, so I put this question. So don't worry, per question is just 0.5 marks. So you will not miss much out. Which one did you mark as case control? Said that see, it could be of their own accord also, and that will also divide them. I think that mostly my marks. The thing is that because you know on the higher side, I took them on the base. I said that if this information is given to you, which one will be a case control? But of course, I have not come and taught you the case control. That was kept for today. So nonetheless, next. Yeah. Which one? Like anyone cross-sectional part? Study of women aged 50 to 60 years in a community. Yeah. So the study of the thing of a age in a community close to it. You, this is the one that I have sent you. Answers. Subject with diabetes are compared with subjects without diabetes. That is case control. The A is okay, case control, right? We study a women aged 50 to 60 years in a community located close to a nuclear power facility. So we are talking about cross, if you see in both sides. You're only seeing in that particular part who are staying next to a nuclear part versus a person which is not. You place it as a cohort, also it will do a cross control of it. I'll take that into thing. Anybody else on this question? That I'll show you in this. I'll show you in my next slides how we take a case control. First, the 10th. This so all of you have seen it. Eleven. Next 12. Okay. Fourteen. To come to this slide. I think you all know how much marks you are getting. I put up the marks again. The two which we had discussed, I keep that into consideration and I put the marks. I post it to the itself. Can we come back to the slideshow? Free खत्म हो गया ऐसे कुछ भी काम नहीं करता. It is floating from here, from there to break the pressure. Okay, now we have already done it, but I'm again just doing a revision of the whole thing. So the dynamics of a disease transmission and the chain of infection. So this is how it works. The source of reservoir, then the transmission, and the susceptible host. So if you actually see, we are all talking about the epidemiological triad in different methods. So the different elements that we have, go forward. आप पीछे और पीछे हैं. यहाँ point है. ठीक. So the elements that the type of host as we spoke, the obligatory host, that means they occur in symbiosis, the definitive or the primary host, the intermediate host, and the transport host. And I'll go into details of each of them. The reservoir, it can be an animal or a person or an innate thing like a soil or a substance in which it lives and it multiplies. So it depends upon its survival and reproduces. So the reservoir is very important. And the agent or the vector, as we have been speaking, is a living carrier that transports that infectious agent from an individual to another susceptible individual. So coming to the types of reservoirs. So we have three types basically: the human, the animal, and the non-living. So the human reservoir, as we said before, when we were doing the definition, they can be cases and they can be carriers. So in the cases, we have something called as a primary case, something called as an index case, and something as secondary case. So what is the difference between a primary case and an index case? A primary case is a person who is in that entire population is the first person who gets that infection. So many a time we really do not know in many of the studies who is a primary case. Like in COVID, we did not know who was that person who got first infected by that particular disease. The index case is the person who is first reported. The doctors or the epidemiologist or the public worker identify the person, okay, this is the person who is spreading the disease. So the difference between a primary and an index case is, primary case is the one who is first person in the population who is infected. The index case is a person who is clinically diagnosed as a first person. The secondary cases, the primary or the index case, they infect the others and they are the secondary cases. Now, according to the spectrum of the disease, as we have discussed before, it can be a clinical case, and depending upon the symptoms, it can be mild, severe, moderate. They can be subclinical cases, and as I said, we have a latent infection which is there. Coming to the carriers, we have three types of carriers. One is the incubatory ones, the ones which are there we call sick later on. One we have the convalescent carriers, the ones which are already recovering, but still the virus is shedding, so they are infective and can spread the infection to others. And the last is the healthy carriers. Can anybody of you give a famous example of a healthy carrier? A particular thing was there, something called as typhoid Mary. Anybody has heard of typhoid Mary? Yes, one. Anybody else? Typhoid Mary. This side I will not. They teach in my absence. Typhoid Mary, can you tell me what's the story of typhoid Mary? Right. Yeah. So typhoid Mary was if I'm not mistaken, might be a cook or a waitress in one of the food joints in London, and she was suffering from typhoid, right? And she was a healthy carrier of typhoid, in the sense that she did not have any of the symptoms of typhoid, but the typhi bacillus was, multiplying inside her, and it comes out with the, secretions of the body. So whenever she used to go to the restroom or there, she never used to wash her hands properly, right? And then she used to come and serve food in the restaurant. So as a result, that she was infecting the food, and the food was being eaten by the different people who were coming to the restaurant, and they were suffering from typhoid. So if her name was given as typhoid maid. So this is one of the examples which is about healthy carrier. The most recent which you all think is the COVID. In the COVID, there were many people who were healthy carriers, who were infected with COVID, but did not have the signs of COVID, but their droplet infections were spreading COVID to the rest of the population. So that is called as healthy carriers. So now the duration of the healthy carrier, again, it is temporary or chronic. Like typhoid Mary was a chronic carrier, temporary or for a short period. Now, the portal of exit, any of the portals. The infection might come from inhalation, you can ingest it, you can inject it, any of the other ports of entry, you can get the infection with. Now, coming to the carriers, as we said, they occur either due to inadequate treatment or the immune response of the host. And the disease is not completely eliminated and it leads to a carrier state. So, an infected person or an animal that harbors a specific infection in the absence of visible clinical disease serves as a potential source of infection to others. So the three things that you have to look for when a person is a carrier is the presence of the disease agent, the absence of any signs and symptoms of that illness, and that virus is being shed in their excretions. Can you give another thing in which thing is a carrier which is very commonly there? Rabies. Dogs who are not properly vaccinated, they are the carriers of rabies. Now, animal reservoirs. There are certain bacteria, viruses, which only affect the animals normally. But due to some reason, when we go into the habitation of the jungles or something like that, those viruses infect the human beings, and so the such infections are called as zoonosis. And the most common of them are, as I said, rabies. From rat, we have the plague, bovine tuberculosis, etc. So there are certain reservoirs and non-living things. Like when we say solid or inanimate things like tetanus, anthrax, they're already there in the soil, and from there we get infected. So the different modes of transmission. So if you see, one is a direct transmission, one is an indirect transmission. Direct transmission is direct contact, with touch or droplet infection, we are coughing, we are talking, contact with the soil, inoculation with skin or mucosa, injectable, hepatitis B, HIV, injectable, same syringes, and from the mother to the child, transplacental. Okay, like syphilis, STD, many of these. Indirect transmission, these are all vehicle borne. The vehicle borne can be mechanical as or biological, and they can be propagated to keep on occurring, or they can be cyclopropagated or cyclodevelopment. Or indirect transmission can be airborne, fomite-borne using the same towels, bed sheets, etc., or unclean fingers. We are coughing, we are coughing. We are coughing, we are with that hand, we are opening the knob of the door, we are touching our eyes situation, we are putting our hands on the different desks and all that. The other person touches the desk in which that particular span when the virus is still viable, and then with that we are touching our eyes, nose, ear, and that is how the virus spreads. Yes, please. Transplant is like the mother has certain diseases. Then the mother, because of the placenta to the child, the mother is supplying blood supply to the unborn child. So the child also gets infected from the mother. So it is the placenta which is giving the blood supply to the child. So that, suppose the mother has got hepatitis B, the child will also get hepatitis B. The mother has got syphilis or any of the sexual transmitted diseases, which is transmitted to the unborn child. That is called the vertical transmission. Susceptible host. So the infection, everybody, as I said, COVID comes to a person who is 100 people are there who comes in contact with a person who has got COVID. Out of those 100, only 40 or 50 might develop COVID. The rest 50 are fine. Why so? because those 50 are more susceptible. So what are the things that we have to check to know whether a person is susceptible or not? There are the four things that we have to think. The portal of entry. Suppose you're wearing a mask. I'm not wearing a mask. A person comes and goes through. The portal of entry, he has a barrier, I don't have a barrier. So I'm more prone or susceptible. The site of election inside the body, the virus which it has to come. Suppose it is an influenza virus. I touch my nose or something like that. I'm touching it. But if I'm touching something else or I'm having gloves, or the site is not, the portal of entry is not the right place, that is it. Portal of exist and the survival in the external environment. If you actually see if that the triangle which I'm talking, I'm only explaining about that only in different terms. So the virulence, as I said before, the degree of pathogenicity, how much it can to produce a disease, and it is numerically expressed as the ratio, the number of cases of infection to the total number infected, as determined by the industry. The case fatality ratio for infectious disease, this we have already spoken about, and the total number of infected people who die of that infection. So it is in a function, the severity of the infection. And this we do for the different cases that we see. Sorry. Site of election inside the body, the part which is more prone to infection. Suppose you have the COVID virus, which is an airborne thing. So the site of election, it will infect the lungs. It will not go and infect the intestine or something like that. Site of reproduction of the images there. But then there are certain places like tuberculosis. Tuberculosis can happen anywhere. It can happen, it's more in the lungs, it can happen in the bone, it can happen in the blood, it can happen anywhere. So this is the site of infection. This we have done. This is the serial interval. The interval, that is the time period between the onset of the primary and the secondary individual. So how much time it takes for a virus to multiply in the second infection. So it all depends upon, if you see this was used in the quarantine thing for the COVID. Like we were trying to see that the COVID will replicate if a person is exposed to an infectious person of COVID, then we used to say from 3 to 7 days or 10 days. Initially, we used to say quarantine for him or her for 10 days, because this was the chance that the other person who has been exposed to the virus can show the clinical signs and symptoms. So this was the serial interval, the interval between the onset of the primary and the secondary case. And the interval between, so it was also known as a generation time. That is the interval between the receipt of infection and the maximal infectivity of the host. Now, the infectious is the communicable period, that is the length of time a person can transmit the disease. So when we say that a person has got conjunctivitis, so we ask, how long is he infected? So we say he is infected for 10 days. The ophthalmologist says he is infected for 10 days. So 10 days we say, okay, you don't come or you stay away. So we have to know the period of infection so that we keep him quarantined or we keep him separated from the rest of the population to prevent further infection. Then the incubation period. Incubation period is the time when that person, the time taken for the virus to multiply to provide the signs and symptoms. So the time from exposure to the development of the disease. So normally, like we say, measles, chickenpox, what is the incubation period? 3 to 5 days. Because it is a prodromal period. The initial part that he has it inside him, which we cannot see. So we are moving about by a normal person, but by that time the incubation is already started in that person. The latent period, we had said about herpes, we had spoken about herpes. So the period between the exposure and the onset of the infectiousness, it may be shorter or longer than the incubation period, which I gave you the example of herpes. So now this is a place where you have to pay attention and where you will be doing your mathematical modeling. This is what is here. So the transmission probability ratio. Everywhere we are using the word probability. That probably this is going to be the ratio. So we are guessing it out. So it is a measure of the risk of transmission from an infected to a susceptible individual during a contact. Now it will differ from the vaccine status of A and B. Suppose like we are saying P00, PP is from an unvaccinated infected to an unvaccinated susceptible. Like when we were having during the COVID period and when the vaccination had just come in. That time we were trying to say, suppose person A is infected with COVID and he meets person B and A is has not taken a vaccine, B is also not vaccinated. So the chances of transmission from A to B are higher. Vis-a-vis, if you compare transmission infected to an unvaccinated susceptible, that is P01. That is A is vaccinated and he comes in contact with B. So the chances of B getting the infection from A, what is that probability? That is the second scenario. The third scenario is that is P10, that transmission from an unvaccinated infected to a vaccinated susceptible. So A is not vaccinated, has got COVID. He comes in contact with B who is vaccinated. So what are the chances of B getting infected? And the last, that is P11, that is vaccinated infected to a vaccinated susceptible. So if you actually see the way the government of India has planned the vaccination program, if you actually now think about it and try putting it into these four groups, then you will see why the government had put in that policy. Why? Because at that period of time, number one, there was a scenario when there was no vaccine for COVID. Nobody knew what it is. The labs all over the globe were literally scrambling to find out a vaccine. After that, for any vaccine to take it, we have those clinical trials. So there are certain time periods by which you have to, like 6 months, 1 year, to see whether there is any side effect of the vaccine or not. But we were facing a scenario which I'm trying to say that all of you will be able to correlate because you have lived through that era. Is it was we are losing lives without vaccine, without is having a vaccine which has not completed its clinical. So we were between the devil and the deep sea. So somewhere certain people shorten the vaccination, the time period which is required for testing the vaccine. They shorten it under experimental methods. But still, finally when they got a vaccine, the number of vaccines which are required for the entire population, vis-a-vis the vaccines which were ready with us. It was the demand was much more than the supply. So then the government said, from whom should we start? So we started it with the doctors who were more exposed to the infection. Then we started with the health workers, the defense forces. By that time, a number of more companies started producing vaccines, and then they started studying. That is where, if you next time in the next class, you can speak to Professor Mandu. They were the ones who did these calculations that how many vaccines are required. Suppose a person who is not vaccinated gets COVID and he is exposed to 10 people who are vaccinated. What are the chances of these 10 who are vaccinated getting the COVID infection? Or the other way around, if a vaccinated person gets COVID, how much will the virus multiply in him? Will he be still in a virulent stage to spread the virus to the others? So if you put all these four together and put it in we'll do this exercise in a later class, that if 10 people of them were vaccinated and 10 were not vaccinated, what is the probability of the disease reproducing further? So this is the transmission probability ratio. Yes. Answer. Yes. Zero is but unvaccinated infected food. It is not nothing to do with us English. It is what they had tried at that time. Get it? So from the unvaccinated infected to the unvaccinated susceptible, then they had a vaccinated infected. A person who was vaccinated but was infected. So how much of virus did he spread to the other? So it is not that this particular, they tried it in different ways. In fact, they just wanted to see whether the vaccine is controlling the difference of the virus. It means if I'm vaccinating a person, and suppose I'm vaccinated and I get COVID. So the chances of mine being infected to you, is it more than I was without a vaccine? So then the government is trying to think here, is this vaccine working or not? Because if you had seen the market, there were about number of vaccines, but the efficacy of that vaccine, how long would it keep a person safe? That was the different study going on. So now over here, we come to this particular slide of exposure versus the disease. So again, we are coming to that thing is how much of exposure? Exposure in the sense of three things. Whether the virus is virulent or not, how much is the quantity of the virus which is one is being exposed, how much is the exposure, like we said, the different routes whether they went to the right route or not, and the thing of the disease, the probability of the disease. So now if we see till now whatever we have studied, and we see the different studies which will come one after the other, these are broadly can be divided into two parts, the experimental and the observational. Now experimental can again be divided into three parts. Randomized control study, any random you pick up. We do field trials, we do the field trials, and we do in certain communities, we do the trial. So this is the experiment. But the most important one which we have been discussing from the previous class is the observation. It's again the two types, that is descriptive and analytic. Descriptive, if you remember, we have those 5 W's. Who, why, which, there are 5 W's. And analytic is, we again have two types of studies, a case control study and a cohort study. I'll just tell you each how it goes. So the descriptive study is, we divided into these steps, which you have seen in all the case studies which we have shown. First, you define the population, which population is being affected. Then you define the disease that is under study. Then you describe the disease in terms of time, place, person, who is getting infected. Then you measure the disease, the mortality and the morbidity. How many people have died, how many people have suffered, etc. Then you compare between the different population, the different subgroups, like old age, middle age, newborn, and the people who are susceptible subgroups who have got comorbidities, who do not have comorbidities, smokers, alcoholics, different types of groups. And then you develop a hypothesis that whatever you think that this might be the cause, this cause is leading to a disease. So you are developing a hypothesis. So in a cross-sectional study, this is the simplest form of an observational study. So what we are doing is a single examination we are doing for across the population at one point of time. And this is mostly done for chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, saves on times and resources, and it provides us minimum information. So a cross-sectional study actually on the prevalence part doesn't give too much of information about it. So we have got better studies. We have got a case control study. Case control study, we do a sort of postmortem. We go backward, retrospectively we are studying. We already know the effect. Like in illness disease, we knew that the people are dying, but we wanted to know the cause of the death. So we are moving backwards in time, trying to see what all they did. So if you see some places they are asking you some question, on this particular day, how many times did you use a lift? For which lift did you use? Did you go to this restaurant to eat? Did you share a room Did you have a snack? So you're retrospectively you're going back. So the effect is known from where you're going back to the cause. So both the exposure and the outcome have occurred before the start of the study. When you come to the risk factors, what are the different risks? So risk is an attribute or exposure significantly associated with the development of a disease. Like when we see smoking, we know smoking causes cancer. So we take lung cancer or new people, some people, and we say, okay, 10 people are there. Out of 10 people, 5 have smoked, 5 have not smoked. Out of those 5, how many have developed cancer, how many have not developed cancer? I'll just show you in the next slide. So that is how we try to find out the risk. And the groups, we try to directly proportionate to the needs. We try to see which group is more prone for a particular disease. So we have got something called an odds ratio. What's the odds ratio? It's a measure of the strength of association between the risk factor and the outcome. So it has got 3 assumptions. One is the disease that we are investigating is relatively rare. The case which we are this disease should be representative of those of the disease. And the controls also should be there. And these controls should be without that particular disease. So what I'm trying to say, if we put it into an example, it will be something like this. It will be a 2x2 table in which you will have this case, that is the people who have that particular disease, and the controls, people who do not have that particular disease. And on the horizontal line, we have people who have been exposed and not exposed. So if you see this, it is the odds ratio is a ratio of exposure. That is A and C are the people who are the cases who have come, and B and D are the controls, right? So the odd ratio will be a multiplication of AD divided by BC. So if you put it into figures and you want to work out something, this is one of the examples which we are like to show. That we have taken smokers who have smoked less than 5 cigarettes a day and non-smokers. Okay. Now over here, so 33 people. So in the non-smokers, less than 5, the one which we have written down. So that less than 5 is smokers and non-smokers. So if you see the case with lung cancer, we had 33 people who had lung cancer and 55 people who had smoked but did not have lung cancer. So when you come to the next line, which were smokers, non-smokers but had lung cancer. So 2 of them did not smoke but had lung cancer, and 27 of them did not have lung. So if we want to have an odds ratio, first of all, we find out the exposure rates for the case. So among the cases are the ones who have lung cancer. That is the A and the C. So if we see the exposure rates, and if you do the mathematics calculation, you see 94.2% is the exposure rate. Vis-a-vis, if you see the control is just 67%. With this, if you see that any of you might say that it is not a very marked difference because the total number of figures are very less. You apply it to a bigger population, take many more of the figures, you will see the difference, the marked difference. So over here, the hypothesis that we are developing is that the person who had smoked less than 5 cigarettes per day, only 5 cigarettes, they are at a chance of a higher chance of getting cancer than the people who had not smoked. So in fact, in which we are trying to say that smoking is a relative risk for producing lung cancer. So this is just one of the odd things that we are saying. So when we are calculating the odds ratio, so if the odds ratio is greater than 1, then if you see, then the disease is more likely to the person who have been exposed. When it is close to 1, the chances of association is very minimal. And if it is less than 1, then it is acts to be a protective factor. So this I would like to, because today was quite a long class, but with this odds ratio, in the next class, I'll show you more examples of where we can apply this odds ratio. And we will work on the different mathematics on it, and I'll give you the data, and we'll work on it, and you will come to a conclusion whether the particular hypothesis that we said that this a particular thing causes the risk factor or not, that we will work in the next step, right? Any questions? Exposure rates A by AC. That is sorry. All that is by all the
So they just calculated your so the exposure rate is greater than your added to not multiplied.
okay, A into C, which you have said. Okay, 35. I got it. Anything else? Any questions? Yeah. The next class we have odds ratio. I'll give you questions on odds ratio. Work it out yourself. And you come to hypothesis whether a particular thing is or not, and we go by that we go up. Right? Any other questions? Thank you so much. Okay, so you want to see the answer? Which one? You want to show her the quiz questions? Yeah. Your wish, the PhD people, do you want to take the BTech people in your group? It's your wish. I'm just the facilitator. Then they'll make you work. They'll make you work. The choice is yours. You want to you're having an upper hand. So I'll put one PhD student with every. They value your judgments. Good. They'll be there. Any other? Teachers for on the they have it. Or if it's not there, you can show on your laptop. Huh? Yeah. Very in the end, all of you will be spelling meeting. As I said, no, I said I did a very free hand. Most of you, I'll do. So the first quiz was just a takeoff. And most of them you'll find that tough. Very tough. Actually, tell me. Some of them were
Some people who were infected and should be the measure for rate.
in the end is like they had infected was 15. Can have certain like this 14 and like 4 or 5 of such things. Can I take an average of?
There was one trade related question.
You can read the question because we have like customized the question.
It is not a problem. In this HIV is a booming people because like how many people of malaria are dying in just how many people are people in it's like you try to compare that to develop the like COVID. COVID was endemic is malaria. Endemic is plague and stuff.